All right, how y'all doing? Reverend Hoddle, checking in. The last time we spoke, I was in El Salvador, and I had to return to Canada, where I am right now, the country where I was born, the country where I have a passport. I had to come back here because I'm going to be in court in a matter of weeks. So let me give you a quick little thing, like why am I here and why am I going to court, and why did I need to leave El Salvador to even come to Canada to appear in court?
You see, we're on a mission. We're on a mission. You see, a mission from God.
Let's rewind back into the pandemic and the lockdowns and all those measures that took place while that was underway. Many of you might remember hearing about a trucker protest in Canada. These were the truck drivers. They were going to drive across the country. Many of them drove for thousands of miles across the country to Ottawa, the nation's capital. This was in the middle of winter, so they were dealing with sub-zero temperatures. And when I say sub-zero, Canada sub-zero, sometimes we're talking 40 below zero. But along the highway, these trucks were going along the highway. People around the country started to recognize that this protest was underway, and they came out in this 40 below temperature to stand over the bridges and along the sides of the highways to wave and put up signs and give a heads up, a thumbs up to the truckers who were doing this. Now, at the best of times, you don't go out in 40 below weather. But in this case, they were doing it to show that the solidarity with what these truckers were all about. So this started catching on not only nationally, but internationally. People started hearing about this around the world. And it became an embarrassment for the Canadian government because it was pretty clear that these trucks were all on their way to the capital, Ottawa, and they were going to hold a peaceful protest. So the government, I am presuming, is talking to their spin doctors, their publicists. How are we going to frame this? And the Prime Minister of the country, Justin Trudeau, decided to frame the truckers in this way.
We know the way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country.
So there's the Prime Minister of Canada calling citizens of the country, calling them out as a fringe, or essentially he's calling them terrorists in this particular movement. Now, what happens when these trucks arrive in Ottawa is they park downtown near the Parliament buildings, and they set up bouncy castles and barbecues and street hockey games and things that were so typical Canadian in the middle of winter. They basically made a street party in the nation's capital in the winter. And again, people around the world are looking at this and going, what a crazy Canadian thing to do. Peaceful protest, but the government was looking incredibly bad because they refused to talk to these truckers. They categorized the truckers as I said, terrorists, a fringe movement. So rather than calling a meeting with them, they decided to impose some measures, if you will, overreaching measures. They began to cut off funds where these truckers couldn't access their bank account, or the insurance on their vehicles were getting canceled. So what did this then do? This just incited Canadians, who in turn inspired people all over the world to start to donate money to the cause. And within a matter of days, millions of dollars were raised for these truckers. And obviously, it was a big fuck you to the government. That's what this said. So people around the world were in solidarity saying, this is bullshit. And that embarrassed the government greatly. So what they decided to do was, anybody, if you donated any money, there were some Canadians that as little as $20 were donated to the cause. They weren't in Ottawa, they weren't standing on the highway, they were just sending a donation to this fund. Those Canadians got their bank accounts frozen. So this caught the attention again of the world media, and the Deputy Prime Minister, a very odd person, Chrystia Freeland is her name. She appeared on camera, and I'm just trying to report facts here, so I don't want to color it with my own bias, but I do want to say that this person appears very psychopathic, almost like she's enjoying these powers that she's gotten and enforcing them on the public. So she, in my opinion, was rather smug in saying, we've shut off bank accounts, and this is something that we have as effectively a weapon against this protest and these terrorists. Well, that ended up backfiring because now Canadians looked at that and went, so under free speech and contributing to something that we just want to say we are in agreement with, they weren't even involved, but now by way of association, their bank accounts were frozen. This ended up, I'm quite certain, it only lasted for about 5 days, because I'm quite certain that the phone started ringing at the Prime Minister's office, and I'm sure it was the Banks of Canada, because people started going into the bank and pulling out their money. They were taking their money out of the Canadian banks, which is essentially beginning a bank run. So I think the call in a clandestine way was, hello, Ixnay on the ease fray of the Ank account bay, and within days, of course, they lifted this and then accomplished what they had, but they still didn't get the trucks out of Ottawa. So it came down to a crunch where they militarized police, and police from not just the Ottawa Police Force, not just the RCMP, but police from around the country came in, removed their name badges and any sort of markings, so that they were just militarized people in uniform, mounted horses, and went in and literally trampled people in Canada. And here's what that looks like, or looked like.
Wow, what is this lady doing? Trampling horses. Trampling. Stop it. Stop it. What? Oh my God. They just trampled this lady. They just trampled that lady.
So you've got elderly women in wheelchairs being trampled by horses. And remember, these were peaceful protesters. And all of this took place until such time as the might overtook the peaceful protest. And it just became so reminiscent of film that we saw from the civil rights movement, when people were strictly just trying to say we're looking to be treated equally, and they were being sprayed down with fire hoses or bitten by dogs. And you know the video if you've ever seen it, or the camera footage that took place at the time. It horrified the world. That was in the Kennedy administration. So maybe there is a correlation there. I have no idea, but At that time, in the 60s, the civil rights movement and what people are saying today do seem to have similarities. So that brings us to, why do I have to go to court? My wife and I were traveling through Mexico, and we were literally looking to move there because of all these things that had started happening in Canada. And it was like, maybe we better get while the getting's good. So we sold assets, and we effectively picked up and moved, and we were looking to relocate into Mexico. Now, we have family here in Canada, and there was going to be the birth of a grandchild, which we wanted to be present for. So we came back to Canada for that. And that happened to be the end of last summer, August of 2022. And we were driving our vehicle. And as we came to the land border crossing in Canada, we had our passports. The government had said that in order to come back into your own country, you needed to put something on your cell phone, which at that time was called ArriveCan. It was an app that you had to install on your phone. Well, that didn't take very long for people to go, well, wait a minute, that's kind of infringing on the Bill of Rights. You're imposing something on my property. My cell phone is my property, and you can't enforce me to do something with my property. So then the government goes, okay, well, go to the website then. Don't put it on your phone. Go ahead and use the website, and just go in and fill out all the documents. So I looked at this website and went through the documentation, and before you can even begin to proceed, you have to read the terms and conditions and agree to those. So in the terms and conditions that I read, it said this statement. Have a look at this. Personal information may be disclosed to government institutions, as well as provincial, territorial, municipal governments, or international health organizations, as well as their institutions for these purposes. So under the terms and conditions, I would be agreeing to allowing my information to be passed along to a third party of whom, I don't know, who might that be? World Health Organization? How about the World Economic Forum? How about Gavi, some experimental company that wants to create mosquitoes, and they happen to know this information about? I have no idea. I don't know what it is. But if I agreed to that in the terms and conditions, I essentially said, yes, you can hand off my information. Well, I can't agree to that. That's agreeing to potentially bring harm to myself. So I had a right under the Bill of Rights in Canada, which are enshrined in the Constitution, to say, no, I can't put myself in harm's way. I have a responsibility to mitigate this problem, which we did. My wife and I said, no, we're not going to use ArriveCan. So we pull up to the border, and we're on a land border crossing, and the very first question is, do you have ArriveCan? Here's a little snippet of that interaction at the border.
Any tobacco products?
No.
No. Cannabis, CBD?
Nope,
No. Nothing with THC in it?
nothing at all.
Any firearm or weapon?
No, sir?
You folks didn't complete a ArriveCan?
No, we did not.
By choice?
That's correct.
And do you have proof of vaccine or no?
We don't disclose our personal medical information.
Okay. And did you acquire a pre-arrival negative COVID test?
Same thing, we don't disclose that information.
It's not whether yes or no, you did get one or you didn't get one.
We don't disclose our personal medical information, so
And are any of you currently experiencing any COVID symptoms?
nope.
Nope.
And do you have a valid quarantine plan?
Yes.
And are you willing to provide me a phone number?
No, sir.
All right, I do have to read something to you folks, okay? All right, you are required to quarantine yourself for 14 days in order to limit the introduction and spread of COVID-19 and follow all other requirements on the handout. You are required to wear a mask while in transit to a place of quarantine. Failure to comply with this order is an offense under the Quarantine Act, where the maximum penalties are a fine of up to $1 million and/or imprisonment for 3 years. Do you understand that you must quarantine for the next 14 days to prevent the potential spread of COVID-19?
I understand.
You understand what I said?
I understand what you said. So we didn't agree to provide any of our medical information or personal details where we lived. We didn't have to. We read the front page of our passport and it said that all we needed was that document to travel back into Canada as a Canadian citizen. But we're told under the pandemic or the Quarantine Act, no. You need to do much more than that. To which we had educated ourselves. We knew that there was the Quarantine Act, and we read through the Act and realized that, okay, we'll present ourselves to you. We're not being belligerent and saying it's none of your business. We said, here we are. You can have a look at us. We don't have a communicable disease. We're not bleeding from the eyes. We don't have Ebola. We're not sweating or fainting or coughing or sneezing or anything. We were just there presenting ourselves, pull our mask down as they instructed us to do. So here we were, a screening officer. Canada Border Services Agency is a screening officer. That's the person in uniform at the booth. That officer said, no, I can't tell if I'm not a doctor. So obviously, whatever the screening process is, it ended right there. They instructed us to go inside the building, and now we were under what's called secondary. So we had to pull our car over, go inside the building. And what tends to happen there is they just let you stand around for a while. There's no reason. They can clearly see you're there. We were the only ones in the entire foyer of this office, and they just look at you. And then finally, some man in a uniform instructs us to step forward and proceeds to ask us all the same questions that they did out in out at the window, the drive-up window. So that was kind of ridiculous, but he took our passports and instructed us to sit down. So there we were. We can't leave. We're being detained, and we can't leave without our passports. I guess we could have, but that wouldn't have been prudent. So we waited, and that's when they called over Public Health Canada. We're now dealing with somebody who is holding our passports, using this information against us, against our consent, and now this individual proceeds to tell us under the Quarantine Act we were violating things. However, they were cutting us a break if we would go back into the United States and get a test, an antigen test. Well, 14.1 of the Quarantine Act says that you can inspect me with whatever technical means you would like. For example, one of those guns that tells your temperature, or they could maybe listen to my heart or whatever. But you can't put anything into my body, a foreign substance like a straw up my nose, or a foreign body, which would be whatever that swirling stuff is that they make you take. I don't know what's in that stuff, and therefore I do not have informed consent.
You guys, a question or what's going on here? Come on, let's have a look. Okay. Have you completed a RIFCAN?
No, sir.
You have an intention to complete a RIFCAN?
Nope.
Are you both vaccinated?
I don't disclose my personal medical or her medical information.
Pre-arrival COVID test?
Same thing. We don't disclose that information.
I was not disclosing information on getting a test done.
Well, because I believe that all we need in order to re-enter Canada is our passports.
Not under the Quarantine Act, sir.
Okay, well, I mean, you're welcome to screen me.
Screen you?
Yeah, well, you can see if I have a communicable disease. I'm not sweating or...
I'm not a doctor, sir. I can't see through you. I don't
Okay.
know what you have inside of you or not. So that's
Okay.
why we have you get the test done.
Okay, well,
Okay? So you don't have it and you have no intention of going back
to the USA?
to get the pre-arrival test?
Not today, no.
Give me a sec here, okay?
Yeah. Okay, who's that, sir?
Can you please give us our passports back? We don't consent to providing our passports to that individual.
I'll be back in a minute, sir.
That we do not consent to having them take our documents, sir.
Your examination's not complete just yet, sir.
We don't consent to the examination of that person taking our documents.
Informed consent. That sounds like the Nuremberg Code, doesn't it? Which they implemented because of medical experiments on people at the in the Second World War. So if this Nuremberg Code is means anything at all, it means that you need to understand what's happening to you before you can consent. Well, neither my wife nor I knew what the formula that we would swish around would be, or what the straw when they jammed it up your fucking nostril, what that would do. So we're not informed. Therefore, we cannot provide you with our consent. It says so right in the Quarantine Act, but that wasn't good enough for this man from Public Health Canada, who, by the way, is also called a screening officer. Not a quarantine officer, a screening officer. We told him again he could have a look at us, whatever he could see. We were clearly not posing any problem to the health of other people once we entered Canada. That was no good. And frankly, I got the credentials of this individual. I had to in preparation for court. And this guy, he's not even employed by Public Health Canada anymore. He was a contractor, and he was taught how to write tickets. So he was effectively a meter maid at the border, and with a fishing rod, waiting for people like us to come in to issue us $5,750 fines twice, almost $12,000 in fines, for exercising our rights under the Constitution of Canada, which is the Canadian Bill of Rights. So we have no choice but to go to court and defend ourselves. They brought the action against us. They infringed on our rights, our mobility rights, that is our ability to travel freely, our rights to informed consent. And if we don't stand up for this, then we're just condoning it. So we will be in court July 28th of 2023. We're self-representing. Now some might say, well, why don't you have a lawyer? You should probably have a lawyer. Well, the more I looked into it, a lawyer is not the slightest bit interested in getting us off charges. A lawyer would plead our charges down. So they'd be very happy to tell us, hey, you were on the hook for $12,000. We pleaded it down to $1,000, and my fee is $3,000, so you're $4,000. So we saved you a net $8,000. That would be a lawyer. You know, thank you, but no. We'll take our chances, we'll go in, we'll get on the record, and that's why I wanted to record this video, because as of this particular moment, we have not been into court. We are filing subpoenas. We'll be asking the border guard to come in as a witness. We are filing a motion of particulars, which will tell the court that we do not believe it has competent jurisdiction to hear our charges, or at that, maybe in that sense, allow us to defend ourselves under the Bill of Rights, because, and I don't want to get into too much of the weeds and technical crap or legal stuff, but there is something in Canada called the Contraventions Act, and what it allowed for is provincial courts to hear federal charges. Otherwise, they didn't have jurisdiction. The Contraventions Act was signed by most of the provinces of Canada, with the exception of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the territories. So if those are all under the umbrella of Canada, that means that there are 2 provinces and the territories which have a different layer of judiciary than the rest of us. Well, the Bill of Rights clearly say 1B or 1A, I'd have to look, I'm going off memory, but whatever it is, we have to be treated equally before the law. So We'll go into this court. We will be on record in that saying they do not have jurisdiction. We'll file a motion of particulars which advises the court that this is how we're going to present our defense. They need to prove that there was, in fact, a governor in council, which is an act of parliament that brought in the measures that allowed them to even issue a ticket under Section 58 of the Quarantine Act. Our defense is that there never was an act of parliament. There was an order in council, which means one minister, some supreme leader of the world could just say with a wave of the hand, now all these people have to abide by these measures because we're in a pandemic. Well, that isn't how it works. And as a matter of fact, when you start to dig under the surface, you realize that Canada has what is referred to as common law. They don't want you to know that in courts. But the common law comes back from English law, which in fact is back to the Magna Carta. So I'm certainly no constitutional expert, nor am I trying to claim to be, but we do know that the Bill of Rights is law in Canada. And until such time as a court says that it is not law in Canada, we have a defense. So that's going to be our defense, and I'll fill you in if you're interested. Come check back to this channel and find out how it goes. Stay tuned. Old Reverend Hoddle and his wife are going to go into court. We're going to get on the record, and you know, even if we still end up with $12,000 worth of fines, we will have information read into the record. And I guess what I'm saying is, you know, if we're going to stand up and do this stuff that we are with Bitcoin, and why we're an advocate of Nostr for free speech, it also means that you got to do the work when the time calls, and that's why we're doing this. So I don't want to say I'm doing this for all Canadians, but I'm doing this for all people that believe in freedom, and I hope you agree and support the cause. So put a comment in the thing below. You know, tell me that I'm out of my mind, or maybe give me a thumbs up. Go for it. You know, take an arrow in the back for y'all. But we got to do this, folks. It's time that we stood up for what's right. It's time that we collected ourselves together and use these tools to our advantage, and say enough is enough. Enough is enough. I get it, pandemic is over, but the shit's still rolling downhill from that time. And if they did it to us once, they're going to do it again. So it's time to dig in. Let's get this done. Let's change the world with Bitcoin. Thanks for tuning in. Be back to you next time.